Okay, so now we're covering variables. Variables are extremely important. These are the information that you're actually asking from the customer. So to give you an example, let's say house washing. The variables we would most likely want to ask are the square footage of the house, the material of the siding, the number of stories, right? Those are the pieces of information you're asking from the customer. You could ask all kinds of other questions like, does it have a walkout basement? Does it have screened-in porch? Oxidation? Any kind of piece of information that you could possibly want to know, you would add that through a variable. So let's dive into it and walk through some of the different variable types that you have available to you. So let's go to formulas. And we will start by creating a new calculator. And in the previous video, I showed you how to set all of this up, or in the previous step. I'm just going to call this test because what I'm going to do here is create a test variable or a test formula with every variable type. And that way you can see how they all look, and I'll explain how they work. So when you're creating a new calculator, you click that new variable button and you're going to see this pop up. First, you're going to give the variable name. If it was square footage of the house, you'd name it that. Material, name it that. Square footage of the lawn if you're doing lawn mowing. Anything, any variable that you could possibly ask for, give it a name that a customer would understand, okay? So I'll do the test, and for this one I'll do a number. This one's very simple to understand. I'll add another variable. This will be test2. This will be a stepper, okay? And then with a stepper, you set a min and max range, and then it'll also have you set an interval. You can open this up, go to variable or step range, min, max, and let me just okay, so you set a minimum and max range between steppers. This is a more useful input type for things like number of windows or anything where you're asking a number of something, and that number is less than 10 or somewhere in that range. Now text, I'll skip that one because that's pretty self-explanatory. That's just asking for text. That doesn't actually affect the price formula. That's just, you may be useful for you when customer comes through and then you're going to confirm the price. You may need to know some information, and so that's where the text would be useful. Checkbox is great for yes or no types of questions. So I'll just go ahead and do test again. Then we got sliders. And sliders are actually where you set the min and max, kind of similar to a stepper, except you can also set the interval. So I'll set the interval for 10, and then so it'll go up 10 each step. Then we've got drop downs. These are pretty self-explanatory. You're all familiar with drop downs, I'm sure. You give the customer an option of different, you click it and then they see a drop down, right? I mean, of multiple different options. So here we just add the options. So I'll just call this test, and I'm filling in just random test info so that I can explain to you how it works. And then I'll go through and build out an actual formula. Odds are, if you're setting this up, you're not going to use most of these inputs. The most common input types are number, multiple choice, and for some people that's all you need. Number and multiple choice, maybe a drop down. Some people like to use checkboxes. I like checkboxes. You may want to use a slider or a stepper just to spice things up a little bit, but you don't have to. Multiple choice. Okay, give it a name. Now let's go ahead and save this. We'll head over to the call screen and test it out. It's this test option. And here you can see all of the different input types. So here's a number input. You can see it's just an input field. You take a number. Here's the stepper input. You plus the plus, it goes up. The minus, it goes down. Similar to the number, but much smaller and better for smaller numbers. Multiple choice, or here's the checkbox option. If it's checked, it's one value. If it's unchecked, it's another value. Here's the slider. You can see it's going in intervals of 10 right here. Drop down. And then multiple choice. Okay, so those are the core input types. Now you also have some more advanced input types, such as the repeating group, and the backend value. The backend value, I'll add this and just show you how it works. The backend value is a value that customers would not see. So this would be a useful feature. Let's say you do commercial pressure washing, and if the lot that you're pressure washing is over 10,000 square feet, you charge 8 cents per square foot. If it's under that, you charge 11 cents per square foot. This is fairly common amongst pressure washing companies. Obviously, if you're doing huge amounts of concrete, you're going to do a slightly cheaper cost per square foot. That's how a lot of people do it, at least. And so you may want to have a system built in to automatically do that. So here you set a default value. So let's say you charge 12 cents per square foot for normal concrete. Then we'll add a conditional value. And then this is where the rule comes in. So you could say, I don't have any actual real questions here, but let's say you had square footage of the surface as a question, and you would say if it is greater than, I don't know, 10,000, then you would set this value to 0.08. And then if that is true, if this question is over 10,000, then the price here would update from 0.12 to 0.08. Okay? And then last but not least, you've got repeating groups. Repeating groups are useful if you are asking for something like, let's say you do tree removal and customer has multiple trees. Odds are you're going to want to know the height, the circumference, the location of each tree, because the price is going to vary depending on, the differences. So you'd want to have that information for each and every tree. That's where a repeating group comes in, so you don't have to ask it multiple times. So your first question would be a number or a stepper saying how many of this, whatever it is. So say they say 6. To answer 6, they would ask 6 times for each tree. It would show that repeating group. So I'll just show you in a quick example. And then you connect it to a count variable, and I can just do this top test one just to show you how it would work. And minimum max, I'll leave that. Count source, we're going to have this set to use another question. And then here's where you're going to add child questions. So these are questions that are going to show inside the repeating group. So if this were a tree, you may say height, and then maybe this is a number in feet. Give it a unit label of feet. And then maybe circumference. Make that also a number. And then here you would add these 2 variables. So we could do height multiplied by circumference. And then you'd also want to add into this formula what your actual formula would be for each given tree. That's not really the focus of this video. I'm going to cover that more in the formula builder section, which will be right after this part, where we'll really go into this. But for testing purposes or for demo purposes, let's go ahead and save that. And then we'll go show you how that would look on the call screen. So let's click test. You can see all the same inputs, but now you see this option here. Now, if we say 5 right here, it'll ask 5 times, right? You can see how it's asking 5 times. If I cut this down to 2, say we only have 2 trees, it's only asking twice, okay? So that's how the repeating group would work, okay? It's useful for if you do holiday light installation, maybe how many bushes, right? And then you ask details for each bush, or how many trees, if you want to wrap the trees. It's relevant for those types of questions, okay? So that covers the input types. I think that answers most of the heavy questions that people usually have about the different input types. Like I said, in the next video, we're going to cover the formula builder. And so in that part, we will be building out an actual formula. This video was more so just covering the different types of inputs, so you'll understand what you have available to you. But yeah, so that covers that. I think I've covered everything. moving on to the next one. I'll see you guys in the next section.